All right, so in this lesson, we are going to estimate the square roots of rational numbers that are not perfect squares. So in the other unit, or in the other lesson before this, we were working with perfect squares, but this time we gotta estimate the square roots of non-perfect squares. And how do we do that? We use what we know. We know perfect squares, and so we use perfect squares as benchmarks. So for example, we take the square root of 5 over 8, and we look at it, it's not perfect, because 8 is not a perfect square, and 5 is not a perfect square. So what we need to do is find numbers that are very close to 5 and 8 that are perfect squares. So 9, I gotta get my pen here. 9 is close to 8, and 4 is close to 5. So then what we do is we take the square root of 8 over 5, and we can say that it is close to, so this equal sign with a dot on top means close to, is close to the square root of 9 over 4. But we know that 9 over 4 is equal to 3 over 2. So we can say that 8 over 5 is close to 3 over 2. So in this example, we used perfect squares that we know. We used 9 and 4 to estimate this non-perfect square of 8 over 5. So using benchmarks is one way to do that. Another way, so let's look at B, the square root of 3 over 10, and right away we say, yep, 3 is not a perfect square, 10 is not a perfect square. So again, we got to use our benchmarks. But this time, I'm going to take 3 over 10 and change it over to a decimal, which is 0.3. So now we gotta think of perfect squares. Let me draw a number line here. We gotta think of perfect squares that are close to 0.3. So let's say that this is 0.3 right here. And we gotta think of what are our closest perfect squares to 0.3. Well, on this side, you have 0.36 or 36. We know that that is a perfect square. And on this side, we have 0.25. And we know that the square root of 25 is 0.5, and we know that the square root of 0.36 is 0.6. So 0.3 is kind of in the middle of 0.25 and 0.36, so we're trying to figure out a number that's kind of in the middle here. So what number is in between 0.5 and 0.6? We can estimate that this is 0.55. Right in the middle of 0.5 and 0.6. And so we check. If we take this, if we square 0.55, what we get on our calculator is 0.3025. So it's pretty close to 0.3. So we can say the square root of 3 over 10 is close to 0.55. So we can use those benchmarks to estimate as well if we put into decimal form. And the last way, we have 3 over 7, or the square root of 3 over 7. So what I would do is choose a fraction that's a little bit easier to work with. So we know that 3 over 7 is a little less than 1/2. 1/2 is a little bit easier to work with. And so we know that 1/2 is equal to 0.5. So now I gotta think of a perfect square that is close to 0.5. So if you know your perfect squares, you would know that 49 would be a perfect square since 7 times 7 is 49. And 0.5, if I take the square root of 0.5, it's pretty close to 0.49. And we know that the square root of 0.49 is equal to 0.7. So we can say 3 over 7 is close to 0.7. So those are some ways to estimate non-perfect squares. You can either find benchmarks. Well, really, that's all we're doing. We're finding benchmarks of perfect squares that are close to the numbers that we have here. So let me know if you have any questions on this lesson. And yeah, see you later.